Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the hot July meeting of the Chelsea Land Use Committee. Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Jeffrey LaFrancois. I'm the co-chair of the committee, along with my fellow co-chair who's joining us remotely this evening, Carrie Keenan. As many of you know, most of you know, I think Mcb4 has adopted a hybrid policy whereby we meet in person with a remote option. If you'd like more information, all of this is on the Community Board 4 website. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and is currently live streaming on YouTube and is accessible immediately after the meeting as well. Tonight we have one item on the agenda. Please remember that we must just a couple of things. On that one item we will get to, we will call for folks to sign up in advance for the public speaking portion of that. We'll be doing standard limits on those comments at 2 minutes each. I'm going to bring up some sort of new business and address a previous letter from a previous meeting before we get into that item. But on top of that, most of all, I want to just do the general reminder of please bring your level of respect and decorum that you want to be treated with to this meeting as well. We recognize there's sort of a whole bunch of angles on the issues that we take up regularly, but we want to be able to discuss them. And to do so, we hope everybody is here in a neighborly sense with that level of respect in mind. Lastly, be cognizant that though we have one item on the agenda, and I hope we don't go till 9 p.m. That is indeed when we have to leave the room. So just reminding everybody of that. Before I go to the old business first, I want to introduce a new member of our community board, to the community board and to the Chelsea Land Use Committee. Shanice, if you just want to grab that microphone and say hello and tell us a little bit about you and where you live. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet everyone. I've been in Chelsea for the past 6 years, New York native, so just excited to get started and hear everyone's perspectives.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us and welcome to Chelsea Land Use. One of the items we took up at our June meeting was a landmarks letter. That letter had to do with a townhouse facade renovation on 20th Street. The hearing for that letter was scheduled before the full board would be able to take a vote on it. So accordingly, Carrie and I decided to take the letter from this committee and bring it to the executive committee meeting. Exec is made up of all the co-chairs of the board and the officers as well. We discussed that letter there. Exec then took a vote, and that formalized the position of the board. At our June 24th full board meeting, we'll ratify that letter. If there is need to significantly alter or change that letter based on a majority opinion, that can be done. But again, this was a decision that Carrie and I wanted to do to ensure that it wasn't just coming out of the Chelsea Land Use Committee, but that exec also had oversight of this also. This is pretty standard practice when there is a vote to be taken, outside of our standard schedule of full board, committee, and exec, which is why Carrie and I decided to do that. Carrie, is there anything else you want to add to that before I go to a hand in the room?
Sorry that I'm not there with you. I have the flu. But I did want to just say that it really was because it wasn't a unanimous vote that we decided to take it to exec to make sure that, other voices had the opportunity to comment and see if, our vote held. And it did. That's it.
Thanks, Carrie.
Oh, and I
David,
think there was
a question.
Okay.
Ooh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, there was a question from David in an email about why was it calendared at LPC before full board? That's, something that we can't control. We can only ask them to not do that, and they did it anyway.
Sure, or pass the mic. Do you mind, Paul, passing that mic down?
Yeah, I don't remember any other instance where it was sequenced this way. Technically, the Landmarks Commission is not supposed to schedule a meeting for a public hearing until after the community board full board meeting. I don't know why it was allowed in this case. I had problems with the way things went forward in the committee vote and wanted to object at full board. And it wasn't until a couple of days ago when I reviewed the executive committee meeting that I realized what had happened. I don't remember any statement being made in committee that the vote would be as effectively final there without going to full board. We were very rushed. It was a very crowded agenda. And I'm also concerned that a motion was made immediately at the end of questioning the presenter of the application. That's not usually what happens. Usually we have a discussion before a motion was made. A motion tends to carry a certain amount of momentum with it. Also during the executive committee meeting that I reviewed, Paul, you stated that every brick that would be removed from the existing facade would be put back in place, and that is not what was presented to us. So I'm just kind of bothered by all of this, by procedural matters, and I won't go into the reasons that I don't think it was a good proposal, which include the fact that the applicant lied to us
David, the
about some
letter,
things.
the letter has been passed by this committee
Yeah,
with a
and
majority vote, and likewise by a significant
As
majority
far
with
as
one objection at
ratification
exec.
goes, the public hearing at Landmarks on this is tomorrow. Ratification will mean nothing, so there's no consolation in that. I'd like to make sure that this doesn't happen going forward.
Unfortunately, we can't guarantee that because this is subject to our July full board meeting schedule, right? We never meet on the first Wednesday of July.
As I said, I've
And
been doing this
so-
for years, and I don't remember an occasion where something was calendared at Landmarks. Usually the applicant has to wait. Why wasn't that done?
I don't know. We don't, as you know, I and certainly none of us on the board can speak for the commission, but this has been is scheduled, is calendared. Frankly, we have sent significantly more levels of significant more import, and I don't say that by a reduction of LPC, but regarding ULURP actions through executive committee authority. So this, again, this is the process the board has to make sure that we are even on the record in the first place with agencies. And so
I think I
we
actually
did our sort of beyond our due diligence by not just having it come from committee, but also having it go through exec as well.
I think I also remember a case in Chesapeake, maybe you remember this too, when Landmarks scheduled a public hearing for a project before it would receive our full board vote. And Landmarks, when you notified them of that, as I recall, Jesse, moved the date back on their calendar, which is what should happen. Everyone who applies to Landmarks has to wait until after full board.
It sounds like maybe an administrative letter could be useful to indeed find out whether or not it's legally required for the board to hold a hearing and a vote before it's scheduled at LPC, as well as perhaps some other clarifying questions for this process. Is that something you'd be comfortable with, David?
An administrative letter that does what?
Asks the questions exactly that you're asking
Of
about
the Landmarks Commission.
Yes. So like things like scheduling a hearing. Are they allowed to schedule a hearing before the community board, full board takes a vote? Question
Okay,
mark.
I'd be willing to see that go out, but that's been my understanding for ages.
Okay, thank you. Carrie, anything else on this?
No, Jeffrey.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Pam? I just want, we're gonna.
Hi, just
Hi.
a friendly amendment to David's approval of your
It's an
recommendation.
admin letter, right? So we're gonna figure out what works and what
Okay,
doesn't for an
just
admin letter.
Instead of asking them, could we please just state that we are understanding that has been the norm, or if it not the absolute rule in the past, and that would Landmarks please in the future stick to their commitment and not schedule hearings for this kind of thing until the full community board has had its opportunity to take a shot at it and produce a letter. Don't,
That
instead
goes
of
beyond
asking
admin.
Slightly, just tell them. That's
I
what
think we just need to ask
expect.
clarifying questions, and from there we can come back with what they clarify.
I'm sorry, start over.
We need to be able to ask clarifying questions. An admin letter is not a place for a statement in this case.
Well, then
So I think
then
it's a
not
useful exercise.
a letter from this committee or a letter from the
I think
full
it's a
board?
useful exercise to start by asking some questions strictly about process. And we can do that in an admin letter.
We can do that with a phone call.
So if you don't want to be in the record, I think,
Oh, I
look,
would
we're-
I
we're-
would just like.
I think
our
Carrie and I are
board-
in agreement to finding out a,
Jeffrey, may I finish?
sure.
Thank you. I would like this community board's voice to be more firm and more definitive in these matters, generally speaking, and this is one opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that. So stay tuned for more of this, obviously at our full board meeting. And Carrie and I will be figuring out an admin letter on the approach there. We are joined by our esteemed chair this evening and former co-chair of Chelsea Land Use, who, because of my conflict, will be leading us through the beginning portion of this discussion. And then because of Carrie's online participation, we'll be passing it over to Mr. Devlin to moderate the discussion, as well as public comment as well. But item one and our only item on the agenda tonight is a discussion about the letter that we're proposing regarding the NYCHA redevelopment plan. So Jessica, over to you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to those from the community who have joined us here in person, and I suspect we have folks online. Of course, I know it's very hot out, so thank you for everyone making the trek today. I think it is on. There we go. So tonight, as was mentioned, we have this proposed letter on the NYCHA project as it stands to date. Jeffrey mentioned I'm stepping in today not only because Jeffrey is P&E, but Carrie does have the flu, and so to help just tee this up and provide a little bit more context for why we are where we are and what this letter attempts to accomplish. For one, I want to remind everyone, including folks in the audience, that the community board has still not taken a position on this proposal. We are still in a very long, a very prolonged, and a very frustrating, but nonetheless, a fact-finding process. This is our desire on behalf of all those who have come before us and sit alongside of us to get more information about what is going to be entailed in and included in, excuse me, in the proposal. Secondly, I do want to note that we have adopted a working group structure where we meet regularly with our elected representatives and the applicant or the development group to try to elicit more of this information. As you all have heard repeatedly over the last year, this too has been a frustrating process. We hope to use these forums and others to report back on what we have learned or where we have been stuck, and to frankly elicit more feedback and support, not only from all of you in the community as to what it is we want to be focusing on, but we know that our electeds, I think many of whom are joining us today or their representatives, to keep them abreast of where our concerns remain and where lack of information continues to keep us from being able to take a stance on this proposal. Additionally, I want to note that we have followed the process to date, which is that there was a draft environmental statement that was put out. This group, along with others, sent comment and feedback to it, including the Housing Committee. This was an opportunity to refine what would be studied in that process. We are awaiting results of that process. So again, we're in a pipeline of moving from, closer, hopefully, to more knowledge to a decision. We are still, though, awaiting the response to that, which will then lead us to yet more opportunities for further discussion and review. But that is not happening or not happening because of anything this board has done. This is following the traditional DEIS process. In terms of this letter, excuse me, hopefully you all have had a chance to review it. The key points, I believe, of the letter are found on page 2, which really outline the remaining the items which we have heard both raised by this committee, the Housing Committee, and those who have actively and regularly presented or joined us as part of the public, residents and beyond, about their concerns of the project. And so those are found bulleted here. I'm just going to read them out so everyone is really operating from the same page and same shared understanding. These include overall site planning, include consideration of potential for renovation, for potential renovation and demolition. All NYCHA units integrated into all renovated and newly constructed buildings. All NYCHA units, regardless of the development plan, have the same apartment finishes and building amenities. All proposed buildings consider the surrounding community context with an emphasis on increased bulk, not height. Management of site planning to limit long-term relocation. For any infill development, it must be 50% affordable, 50% market rate housing on both campuses. Inclusion of moderate and middle income housing in newly constructed buildings with market rate housing as a component only to the extent needed for Chelsea NYCHA development financing. Inclusion of a project budget for extensive interim repairs given the long development and construction timeline managed by the RAD PAC partner and not by NYCHA. Development of a realistic project timeline given the proposal will be redeveloping a central portion of the Chelsea neighborhood, and a thorough construction mitigation plan. All of these items are things that we have heard and discussed over the last year. Not all of these things obviously have been agreed to or have been given serious, I should say, consideration or airtime by the development partner. What we then propose or have discussed is what needs to be the process to ensure that these things can be delivered. What is that process? Usually we have a ULURP, but as we've seen with the Port Authority bus terminal and many other projects, a lot of work goes in before you get to ULURP. And we have not seen a development partner who has come to the table to date to actively engage in these topics. And the purpose of this letter, and hopefully all of our work, is to move us closer to that kind of rich engagement where frankly, the needs of the residents for more appropriate, high quality housing here in Chelsea can be delivered. And I should have started with that, which is that we recognize, I think all of us, and have heard from the extensive comment that not every resident, but many residents face very difficult living conditions that have long gone neglected and without adequate repair. I recognize not everybody, thankfully, has been subject to that, but many residents have, and that we are working towards a project that can benefit all residents equally and Chelsea as a whole. So with that, as was stated, Paul is gonna manage the discussion. I think what we have proposed to do is first hear from our committee members and then go to the public. We'll ask that everybody will limit their remarks to 2 minutes. If you have a copy of the letter, I would encourage both for the committee and the members of the public for your comments to be as generative and productive as possible so that we can get this letter to a place that we all feel good about. That said, and the co-chairs of this committee may well not agree, but we don't have to send a letter tonight. I hope we will, because this has been a longstanding open issue. But as we've heard on the issue that was just discussed, having consensus and clarity and feeling good about a foundation that we can lay for this process going forward is absolutely important, and I don't think should be rushed. So I hope we will get there this evening. This is the only agenda item, but we should make sure that all voices can be heard and that consensus, I hope, can be reached. Finally, I just want to echo Jeffrey's comment. I know these issues are difficult. I know that they are personal in many ways, in many, many ways. And I just ask that everyone have respect for each other and for the perspectives that are going to be here tonight that we're sharing with each other, and that we really do our best. It may sound Pollyannish, but that we create a respectful environment where we all can work towards an outcome that we can feel good about. So I just ask that everyone come up with your comments with that in mind. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul. Unless Jeffrey's Peony, but unless Carrie or anybody has anything from the chair side have anything to say.
Before I come up, can I do my committee comments and then moderate? Thanks.
We'll start with committee comments. Paul,
Thanks.
your 2 minutes.
No, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this letter. It reflects, I think, a lot of the dialogues that we've been having and conversations, and I like that we're taking a proactive step to say this is our goals. One of the comments that I wanted to add in on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th bullet is the management of site plan to limit long-term relocation. I also want to add some language about multiple relocations of current NYCHA residents. We want to avoid having people have to move multiple times as the campus is developed and people move out of an apartment into a temporary, into a final. So just some language that we keep track of how many times people have to move to accomplish the overall goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I do also, I really did not want to rehash too much of the past. It's here in the letter. I just want to point that the NYCHA working group really was a model. Many people felt very, that allowed for a lot of information on the table, that it allowed for transparency in this process, and it did reach a number of conclusions, which included the endorsement of the RAD PAC deal, which did include the transition from Section 9 to Section 8. And so those were things that were previously determined based on a consensus-driven process. We have now a proposal that is distinct from where the working group netted out, but I think we want to acknowledge that there were some hard-earned gains that were achieved during that process through consensus, discussion, coming together regularly, and that got us to a place, again, noting that place is different than we are now. Okay. Paul.
Thanks. So as we normally do, we'll begin with committee comments and then proceed to public comments from there. And we'll add on other board members as needed. But let's start with committee members. Oh, you're in the mic. Great. I see Betty's hand up. So let's start with Betty.
First, I'd like to thank the drafters of the letter. I don't know who all wrote this draft letter, but it shows a huge amount of thoughtfulness and hard work. I have some suggestions for the letter. Can you hear me?
We can hear you great. Thanks.
Okay. I think the letter could be strengthened by saying that up front, a kind of a summary of the main goals or the page 2 bullets. So I would suggest that we say something like, starting by saying that we are extremely frustrated by the applicant's lack of transparency about the proposal and minimal meaningful analysis. I think the letter, instead of sending it to the development team, should be sent to our elected officials, and the development team could be copied. And I think in the first paragraph, we should make a strong statement, something like, we are seeking your support, this is to the elected officials, for Community Board 4's request for a proposal that includes full descriptions of possible alternatives based on transparent, robust data about. Now, some of what I made a little list, it really overlaps with the bullets on page 2, but I'll just say them anyway. Robust data about financial calculations, renovation versus demolition, construction timeline, resident relocation, number of affordable, moderate income, and market rate units, land use impacts on the site and surrounding neighborhood. Public planning meetings should be held explaining the options and implications to current residents and neighborhood residents. And then I think the letter should include the faulty tenant survey, perhaps as a footnote or an appendix item. And on a personal level, I care very much about this issue. I spent a long time on the old working group, and we worked so hard on that. And I hope that we can get our elected officials to support our requests. Thank you.
Thanks, Betty. Can you send those comments? It looks like you're reading them. Can you make sure to send them to Carrie and Jeffrey? She sent them. Okay.
I sent them.
Thank you.
I sent them.
Perfect. Thanks. I see Viren's hand up next. Viren.
Yes, very quickly. I think Betty covered it, so I'm going to second what she said. I think this letter should be sent to the electeds and not just to development team, because our whole question is about the process itself and the lack of transparency. So I think that should be brought up front, and it should be addressed to the electeds. Number 2, the 50-50 divide between affordable housing and market rate. I think we should ask for more affordable housing, and the market rate housing should be done to the extent maybe required to sort of make up for whatever avenue you need for upkeep of NYCHA, for renovation of NYCHA units and the project cost. Lastly, I think stronger language should be added in terms of preservation of some of existing NYCHA units. So in other words, instead of saying that renovation should be considered, we should state that preservation should also be considered. Thank you.
Thanks, Farron. Any committee members present? So we'll start at that end and work our way up.
Thank you. So with regard to the
Okay, you need to get close to the mic. Thanks.
with regard to the bullets, the paragraph immediately beneath it really it negates the bullets above. I mean, it shows that all entities involved have been dishonest, pretty much incompetent, and are strictly out for financial gain. We're saying it in our letter, basically, in that paragraph right below the bullets. I really think that what Betty said was very good. I agree with Viren on the more than 50-50. The electeds need to be addressed directly. I think that's important. I just think that, the entire project should be reset and rethought. It's just sitting down and talking at a table with the electeds, perhaps new liaisons from NYCHA, because we're saying that everything's not been truthful. We're saying that in our letter. So how we can go back and say, we've dealt with you for so long, you've been dishonest the whole time, but we hope you're honest now. I think new people need to step in, perhaps new developers, the community board. I think it just needs to be reset. But I do agree with everything Betty said. And I think 50-50 is not enough. I think there should be more affordable housing. Okay.
Thanks, Inga. David?
The letter refers to the atypical relationship between NYCHA's costs and those of the development team, but it doesn't then go into that entire analysis by the city from 2023 that showed that the actual renovation costs were always lower than NYCHA's estimates, often by a lot. So there's a certain amount of evidence that could be added. I think I agree that we need a letter that goes to the electeds, possibly two letters, one to NYCHA, one to the electeds. But I would want our letter to capture the mood of our last meeting. Everyone around the table weighed in and overwhelmingly expressed a lack of trust. Bert added to the chorus, calling the plan a land grab. Betty noted how stuck we were and suggested intervention by our electeds, which I think I wholeheartedly agree with. Joe suggested a pause of 3 to 6 months to reconvene the original working group and take a flexible approach toward a new plan that could achieve community consensus. I think that should be our principal goal, and that our letter should do everything possible to get there. There are 5 things that I'd like to see in the letter. First, that it address the elected officials. If we find the NYCHA development team, as Inga just said, untrustworthy and unaccountable, why would we expect them to respond to our letter in an honest and accountable way? Directly and publicly confronting our electeds with the improper way the project has proceeded will put them on the spot. It should rightly make them demand acceptable answers in return for their continued support. The idea is to have them join us in the broader community in challenging the plan. Simply copying them on a letter to the development team leaves them on the sidelines where they're still cheerleading the plan. We also need to represent the entire community to them. We should tell them about neighbors who are infuriated with them at being left out of the conversation. I don't remember hearing a word of support for this plan from the broader community. If that's in fact so, we should let them know. Second, I would clearly state that the 2 draft scope of work alternatives, both of which require full demolition, are not acceptable to CB4. because they're based on a wholly unsubstantiated and implausible renovation estimate by a private developer with an extraordinary and disqualifying financial interest. The current draft letter says that Related's astronomical renovation estimate, quote, may indeed be factual. I think we instead need to hammer home all the reasons it can't possibly be. If the development team hasn't been able to justify its wild claim in a full year, we're entitled to call it a lie. Third, we should emphasize the impropriety of the process and the loss of public trust in it. There's every appearance that the tenant survey was a calculated smokescreen to distract from the renovation estimate's lack of credibility, to make an upzoning that would enrich Related look like the NYCHA residents' idea, and to pit the residents against the wider community. We've learned that the survey respondents most preferred the rezoning option. As this alternative now appears in the draft scope of work, it would allow, quote, location of buildings without regard for current zoning's applicable yard, court, distance between buildings, or height and setback regulations. This would enormously degrade the residents' quality of life, but wasn't shared with them in the survey. We need to challenge our electeds on their support for such a shameful and indefensible process. Or we should stress that environmental concerns would decisively favor renovation, even if it would truly cost as much as new construction. The new construction alternatives have a deal-breaking cost in embodied carbon. The total greenhouse gas emissions from extraction of raw materials, manufacturing, transportation, demolition, disposal, and construction. They would also destroy hundreds of mature trees. This would fly in the face of the main goals of the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, which aims to reduce the carbon footprint of the construction industry by 50% and increase the city's tree canopy from 22% to 30%, a goal shared by Councilmember Bottcher's Urban Forest Master Plan. Environmental justice specifically concerns the disproportionate effect of environmental burdens on those who, like many NYCHA residents, are marginalized or disadvantaged. None of this has been factored into the equation. Fifth, we should note that the project scope and goals have shifted dramatically and harmfully without community involvement. While the rules of the request for proposals that Related one may have technically allowed for this degree of scope change, the proposal has gone from one for 6 infill buildings with no demolition to one with complete demolition and all new, largely market rate swaths of development at midtown-like height and density. That may be legal, but it sure isn't right. The current proposal is violently at odds with community-led zoning initiatives dating back 3 decades. All of this was done without the benefit of a competitive RFP process that would ensure the best deal for the city. I think we should openly call this a land grab. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Lots of good points. One question I would ask of you is, it did seem in the letter that was an analysis of the cost differential, and you said you have different data. I'd suggest you email that to Carrie and Jeffrey so they can incorporate it. We'll have further conversation on the other points, but you're reciting data. You should probably just send it to them.
And
Anybody else?
please send us all your notes, David. Thank you.
I know Brad Pescarella has his hand up, but his camera's not on. Brad, can you turn your camera on and join us? Okay, Brad, move on. Anybody else? Let's continue up the line. Hector?
After reading the draft repeatedly, there's a lot of good points here, but it seems very one-sided already. And it looks like some people on the board have already made their decisions on this, concerning that supposedly there's no responsible parties that are running this operation, this plan. This is not new news. So for the folks that say that they were not, it was in public, there were lots of meetings being made for the tenants and residents, and it was all over the newspapers. There was a lot of publicity around it. So I find it really appalling that some people come up and say, oh, we never heard about this. Why were we never involved? For the same sake that Fulton and Elliot Chelsea residents don't have a say in anything that happens at Penn South or London Terrace, really. We don't, we're not invited to their meetings. We don't get a say in whatever they do. I mean, there's, they took down a building on 26th Street on Penn South, minority-owned businesses were run out that have been there for over 30, 40 years, okay? And nobody discussed that with us. And right now, there's a horrible building going up that's spreading out into the street of 26th Street there on the corner. And I'm sure it's going to be beautiful once it's done. But again, no discussion was made with the people of NYCHA concerning that. So it has to be quid pro quo. If you want something, you should have been maybe a little bit more forthcoming in the past. NYCHA's pretty, the NYCHA tenants are pretty, what you see is what you get with them. And basically, there's a lot of hardworking families who have struggled with a lot of inequalities, a lot of disgraceful living conditions, a lot of hazardous and dangerous situations for many years, okay? And I hate to say it, but NYCHA apparently has been the culprit for all this. And obviously, you know, there's things in the news that have happened. And yeah, I find that appalling as well, but we all knew who we were dealing with because we saw over the years, example after example of what they were doing wrong or not doing right. Hence, the buildings fall apart. People say, oh, why aren't the buildings as nice as Penn South? I mean, we do all the great things all the time over here. Yes, if you pay into it and it's well planned and it's designed properly, yeah, it would be. They have proper maintenance going on all the time. They have ground security, and it's beautiful over there. But again, we're talking about NYCHA now. There is no funding for that, no matter what anybody says, okay? There's been, the funding has been dwindling for so many years now that there's almost nothing available. When you're waiting for a front door downstairs that's been reported for over 3 to 4 months and is damaged, and then you have homeless people just pouring in during the evening or drug dealers shooting up in the stairwells, I don't see any of people from the neighborhood stepping up and maybe, you know, keeping an eye out. I don't see Penn South saying, hey, why don't we offer some security over there? Maybe we can have them extend we can security. I'm talking about Penn
Excuse me, sorry, folks. You'll all have a moment to speak. Please let the speaker speak.
Again, as I said, it's not very fair that the people of NYCHA have to now bow down to our neighbors because they don't feel comfortable about the plan, a plan that's been in the works for many years now. Yeah, people can shake their heads all they want, but unfortunately, just because you didn't know about it doesn't mean that it wasn't presented out there. And that's from the residents as well that are here and not here as well. And yes, we have people that are going to deny that it ever happened. I don't know. We have minutes from many meetings, documentation, in the hundreds here. Okay, door knockings, phone calls, cold calling, everything, meetings repeatedly. Some of which I was involved with as well, being a resident of Fulton houses. Now, I am in a weird position because I have to try to be unbiased. But when you hear so much negativity and people saying, oh, there are lies being put out there, these people are not honest, there's nobody competent, you know, we are trying to build something and do something here that's good for the people of NYCHA and the general community. But you don't see that right now because you're worried about your the dust from construction, the noise, the shadows, and I get that. That's something to be concerned about. And we will try to, and I'm sure in proper meetings with the public, which I have no problem with, and I don't think anybody does, possibly you can come to some, you know, agreement that, hey, we'll go over and above and beyond. But I'm not the developer here, and I'm not NYCHA either. I cannot make that decision for anybody. Okay, but as I said, it's been very biased, and I could see, you know, according to this letter in the paragraph, that it has.
Hector, I might recommend
Yes,
that.
I'm gonna-
Not to, but like the recommendations for the letter.
Yes,
If you feel it's
the
if you feel it's
recommendation for the
biased,
letter, the
make
last
recommendations for
paragraph seems
changes.
very one-sided and should be removed entirely.
Which should be removed?
Which, yeah, the one, let's see. Page 2 on the bottom, the last paragraph. Now, honestly, I do understand that there's frustration that the developers supposedly have not supplied the detailed information as requested, but it's my understanding that they did supply information. It's just not everything we asked for, correct? Is that correct?
I think that some of the language in here that you're proposing get changed.
Right.
To, strike some of the
Mhm.
more hyperbole of the language might be acceptable to the co-chairs. So if you want to propose some tweaking of that language to tone it down some, I think that
Fine.
that's
And lastly,
probably would be.
lastly, and I'll move on because I don't want to monopolize the time like it has happened in the past. Okay, we started out with resident involvement here in a working group that involved many people from many walks of life throughout the city. Politicians, city planning, NYCHA. We even had representatives from Hudson Guild there as well, okay? Among many, and there were residents as well that were not even on a resident association meeting that attended these meetings as well. Now, for many years now, it's been, we did the RFP, we did the plan, and the proposal in the beginning, and yes, it's changed. Yes, I understand. There's concern of that, of the change, that's for sure. But for us to involve, the letter is supposed to be to the developers. We need to settle this with the developers. Why is it being recommended that the politicians, it should be sent to the politicians and politicians that have already supported this plan? So, and I get it. You want to stir the pot a little bit possibly and get some results if that's what you're trying to do. But honestly, you still got to work through the developers. They're the ones doing the plan and the tenants as well. And that's the key thing. The tenants are vastly involved with this. Vastly, okay? And just because you have a handful of outliers that decide that, hey, I don't like the plan, so, let's do something else. But anyway, I think that's it pretty much. But basically, I think directing it to the politicians like this is not the correct way to do it. I think you should continue the developers and let's try to see if we can work things out with them.
Great. Thanks, Hector. Moving on. I'm going to remind everybody, there are sign-up sheets for the public to speak. If you have not signed up yet, please do so, and we'll give you the opportunity to have your 2 minutes. Okay, right now we're on committee discussion. One other.
Yeah, I'm present and eligible to vote, obviously, because I'm a Fulton tenant. That's what I've been told, so. Okay.
Thank you, Hector.
All right, thank you. Here you go.
I want to note 2 or 3 points. First is, I think I appreciate the effort that's been made to shape this letter. I'm going to +1 the paragraph that's been identified as it's unfortunate that this plan ... at the end of page 2. I don't know what purpose that serves exactly. In terms of saying to someone, here's what we want you to focus on, and then plugging that in, even if the content is accurate. So I do have questions about what what's valid about including that paragraph. Specific to the additional content, I feel like this letter buries the lead a little bit as far as I'm concerned, which is in paragraph 3. Because the most pressing matter as far as I'm concerned is, other than security and pest management, we are not aware of any apartment promised improvements occurring. And at the end of the day, this is a long-term commitment that has been made to figure out what the future of this is, and there was a commitment made to a meanwhile plan. And if I understand correctly, that has not been executed on. And the last time we convened, the messaging was, well, that got punted from the developer back to NYCHA. I think there's something very important about continuing to elevate that. Right now, there are buildings, there are apartments that have necessary repairs that have not been touched. And I think it's appropriate for us to beat that drum repeatedly, that you can't get over on your commitments and you can't build trust if you're not going to make a commitment to trying to make things better as soon as you can. And that has been a failure over and over again. The third point I want to make is There needs to be an additional bullet, and I'm happy to write this out. There needs to be an additional bullet that is specific to any community-based organization that has a footprint in and around this development, that they need to be taken care of as this project unfolds, because we have seen in other places how they may be put, and in this case, we're really flagging it as Hudson Guild. We don't want them to be in a position where they are losing space. They should be maximized in terms of space. They should be supported because they are the go-to entity for many residents in terms of getting resources. That would be my additional point. The fourth thing to say is, I also don't understand at this point, so it's an open question. I also don't understand at this point what the value add is of putting this in the hands of the elected officials. As much as I understand and appreciate that they should be representing the needs of the community and they should be present in this conversation in every way imaginable and perhaps have been in the past, maybe are tangentially now, I'm just not sure what that does or changes at this particular moment to engage the elected officials as your go-to.
Thanks. I think we're definitely, there are many of these topics we're going to come back to, but Jeffrey and Carrie, the point about the community center stuff, I think that did come up in previous meetings. I suspect that's going to be a friendly amendment to the letter, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So if you can send that bullet point as it is to them, that's an easy one. Thanks. Brad's back. Brad? Brad, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Thank you, Paul. I just wanted to second the thought that these repairs are not being done. It's appalling. We've been bringing it up. I think that has to be another drum that we are beating, which we have been. I also like to make just a simple one to our bullets. I think it would be very helpful if the developer in our request literally said, this family is an apartment 2B, here's the rendering, and here's where it is. I just think, you know, looking at boxes and looking at on a road, it doesn't help. People want to see, just like if you were buying an apartment, which they are, and they're getting their space, they should be able to see it and know where they are literally designated in the project. I think that would help. I don't see a reason to pause. It's already been delayed enough. I feel it's been rehashed. I do feel there's voices of concern, but I believe there's a lot more voices that want this. Thank you.
And Brad, if I could maybe add a friendly part to your bullet, not only tracking where they are moving to, but an inventory of where people currently are. I don't think we have a full inventory of where people actually live, how many units are filled and empty. So if you could add that to your bullet, I think that would be just to verify. Thanks.
Paul, I think that's a great idea. This is where you're coming from. This is what we have currently. And this literally is their unit. How many bedrooms? Because I know that's an issue with sometimes if they're going to take a 2-bedroom, they're going to get a 1-bedroom. That's what they discuss. We just need to, everybody needs to know what is happening directly affecting them.
Thanks,
so,
Brad.
Thank you.
Bert?
Yeah, I just want to say that I agree with everything that Betty had said before, putting some stuff up front, that we need to be clearer, more, and, you know, I hear people say, oh, we got to quiet it down, quiet it down. I don't think we have to quiet it down. I think we have to be louder. Okay? We need to be louder and not sort of go into the corner and, you know, be quiet. No. So I think put it up front, and there's a whole, we keep raising the issue here. I hear it over and over again about the process and what we're missing. That we can't come to any conclusion one way, another, yes, no, in between, whatever, because we're missing so much information. And it's not a question that the information is buried someplace and we just didn't open up the book. We're not getting the information. And I'm not going to be, you know, conspiratorial or anything like that. I'll let someone else do. I'll let someone else do that. Okay. But I think in some ways, almost purposely, we're not getting information. Because I find the language in the bullets great, but I find it awkward, the language awkward. The following must be considered in all future discussions on the project. And what are we saying here? We're really saying, before we come to any conclusion, we got to have this information. We got to have these are sort of like sub-plans, what we're asking for. They're not, these are sub-plans, most of these bullet points here. We want to see what you want to do, okay? We're not just going to say, go ahead, jump into the river or the pond, okay? We need the information, and I would try to change that language. The following must be considered. It's not just consideration. We must know. We must have this in front of us before we can come to any kind of conclusion. It's not just to be considered. And I just want to say something else. People, that last paragraph, I'm sorry, Pamela. That last paragraph here on page 2, it's unfortunate. People seem to be hesitant about including it. I have no hesitation. I have no hesitation about it, including that. Okay? That is important because that's part of what we're really saying. And that there does not appear to be a capable agency. You know, some people say, oh, it's 40% capable or 25% capable. But for whatever reason, purposely incapable or just accidentally incapable, the result is the same. We're not getting answers.
Thanks, Bert. Pam?
Well, everything that Betty said, everything that David said, everything that Bert said, all of you, I'm in total agreement with. I don't see any downside in addressing this letter to our elected officials. They need to have a wake-up call, and it should come from us. I think that's important. It can be addressed to the electeds and a separate letter that's been suggested to the developers. I'm going way out on a limb here. I'm not going to add anything to this letter, but I am personally just fundamentally disturbed by the moral issue that has to do with taking public land and turning it over to private developers, for-profit private developers. I think there's something just basically fundamentally wrong. And I don't know if there's any way to correct that or to get around it. I'm kind of wondering if Related discovers that they're not going to get demolition, but they're going to get renovation, are they going to walk? What are the chances that they won't find it sustainable and they won't be able to make enough money off the deal? They might just take a powder. I wouldn't be surprised, and it wouldn't be the first time. I'm concerned about the loss of open space on the campuses. I am very concerned about the loss of the tree canopy, and I'm very grateful to certain people who are present tonight who have made it made a huge effort to make a study of that, and I think you're going to hear about it. I'm just kind of appalled by this whole nasty mess, and I can't imagine how it got this bad. Sorry. Other than that, yeah, I agree with what everybody that I said has said so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Rodney? So Mike Noble, I see your hand up. You have asked in the past to go last, so I was holding off on you unless
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, hold me off.
Yeah, so I was going to call on you anyway. Marty, your hand popped up. So why don't I do Rodney because he has the microphone, and then I'll come to Marty.
Good. Thank you. And I agree with Betty as well with respect to the thoughtfulness of the letter. I especially like the background, paragraph 4 and 5 that starts with in 2018. I think it's ironic that NYCHA started with the idea of doing a demolition. The working group came along, and I agree with Jessica. I thought the working group's work would have been a model for the city and other cities, and then it goes opaque with sort of a lack of transparency when sort of pops up with demolition coming up again. I don't want to lose what Joe brought up at the end of last month's meeting. I think the idea of a group coming together, working 3 to 6 months to sort of build consensus, transparency, would work, and maybe we can offer that. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to put that in the letter, sort of behind the paragraph where we say, public trust, or, that we're talking about. Maybe we make an offer how we address the lack of trust. But again, I think the letter works, but this whole process, I agree with Pam, has been a little disheartening to see where getting the answers from NYCHA and related as well. And I agree with Brad and Greg. We should hold them accountable to doing the work. In the meantime, was I guess the phrase we heard last year. I think they should be accountable to providing these people with housing and repairs, and they shouldn't have to wait for related to be involved.
Thanks, Rodney. Marty?
Thank you. The last meeting we had most members, not all, talking about the distrust that we have had for this process and for the designing team. I don't think that's made it into the letter well enough. So I agree with Bert. I'd keep the last paragraph, and I'm agreeing with the points that David and Betty have made. I hope a lot of that will find their way into the letter, but most of all, there are statements about distrust, as that paragraph at the end of page 2 says, but I think the letter should open with the tremendous amount of disappointment that we have, that the community board has, that many of the tenants has, distrust for the process that's going on. Other than clarifying the bullet points and adding to them, I think that's the major comment that I have. I am pissed off at not getting the information that we have been asking for so long, and we should express that disappointment in this letter. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty.
Paul, can I make some comment?
Jeffrey's going to make, your P&A, but you can make comments. Sure,
Of course,
Yeah,
correct.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Just
the
had
point of being a
a
committee member.
process in my mind. That's all.
That's okay.
So, go.
Hi, everybody. As Paul mentioned, I'm President Elliot on the topic, but certainly can still opine as a committee member. So just a couple of comments on what's been said in some process thus far. We've been at this a year, as the letter states. In fact, just this month, just a couple of days ago. Anybody that tells you there's a textbook from something that's happened in the past on what we're in right now is not telling you the truth, because this is entirely new. We've never seen a proposal like this before, so there's no sort of parallel for what can be done in terms of process or sort of way going forward. So I think the board's done a bang-up job over the past year of doing all we can at the table, off the table, to get as much information as we can. And yet still, we don't have a lot of information. So the frustration, I think, is totally germane. Just a couple of things for people to think about, though. I do think we need to make sure that we continue to stay at the table. And whether or not we like our developers or we're happy with our electeds right now is kind of besides the point. It's really important that we keep a seat that is respected and is prominent at the table. And we are typically really good at doing that. So I just want to put that out there. Another thing to keep in mind, not having a developer for this project is not acceptable to many of the tenants, right? Not having this go back to the drawing board when we are at sort of 5 years into this already is just not acceptable for anybody, given everybody has expected vast improvements to the site in this amount of time. And here we are a year into our engagement and no improvements have still been made. I also want to remind everybody that tomorrow, the assigned developer could decide to move forward in an as of right fashion. Plainly, that could start tomorrow. So bear that in mind as we think about how we continue to engage with the development team and the electeds. That is a totally legal option that they can pursue as of right. Not as much development potential, but as of right is still an option. My final sort of comment is just to think about the realities of being a neighbor and also being a resident in these buildings. We've been talking about this for a year. It was spoken about for many years prior to this, and nothing has still changed. How long are we willing to go without any movement, either for improvement of our neighbors in their current living situation, or sort of going by the wayside and throwing all the work out that's been done over the past several years? I'm not willing to throw that work out. And I also feel really strongly we need to be pushing in earnest to get work to start very quickly for that meanwhile plan, at the same time figuring out, no matter what the development proposal is going to be, what that is, and that those two can run on a parallel path, but that there has to be improvements being made ASAP through the Pact Red agreement that has been executed, and separate and apart from that, and also in a timely manner, a process and a plan for redevelopment, which considers all of our outlined bullets. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I'm going to go to Mike next. And what, again, reminder to the public, if you haven't signed up to speak, I need your name and address before you speak. And then, oh, I have Carrie's hand up. I can't see the screen.
Paul.
And what I'm going to do after this round is I'm going to kind of to summarize what the conversations have been. And I'm pulling out, there's probably 3 or 4 topics that will require some debate to reach a resolution. But I think there's consensus along lines of a lot of the other points. So I'll have the public speak, then we'll come back to committee to hash out some of the points that are going to go into the letter. So Brad, unless you have something new to add to this rather than debate on the topic, your hand is down now. Thank you.
Yes, I do, Paul. I do. I just, there's been some comments made in the committee. How did we get to this point? And the failure of calling it a land grab. It's kind of disturbing because the reality is.
Brad, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you? I want that's the topic I want to debate a little bit further. So let's come back to that point, because I think people have a variety of viewpoints on that. So let's come back to that, because you're now engaging in the debate part I want to debate in. Let me go to Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. I want to, Paul, I'm sorry. I want to thank Jeffrey for his level-headed assessment of everything that's going on. And you speak differently from everybody else. I must say that. I appreciate it. The thing that bothers me as a tenant is that this could, be dragged on even further than it already has. And it's just way too long. Anything that throws more glass in the road is going to delay everything that we've been waiting for here. So be aware of that. I appreciate everything that Hector said. I agree with everything he said. And all the many points that I had on this letter, I'm going to not try to change anyone's mind on that, okay? It's like telling somebody how to vote in November. It just ain't happening. I think people's minds are made up regardless of what they're saying. And so I won't go down that road. I give up on that. But please, keep in mind that we have to have something done here. And that's it. And thanks, Jeffrey. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Mike. Oh, Mike, would you make statement of the record that your voting status, please?
Oh yeah, I'm P&E as well. My conflict arises from the fact that I live here. All right, that's my conflict. Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Carrie.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks everybody for all of your great comments. I just wanted to say a couple of quick things, kind of following up on what Jeffrey was saying. To remind the committee that though I'm not against bringing up the idea, and the sort of failure of the meanwhile plan to the top of the letter, we have written a separate letter on the meanwhile plan, and we continue to engage with the development team on that. That's coming out of HHHS, as we decided as a group, since it is mostly focused on tenant rights, but we continue to speak to them all the time and contribute to those letters. So just so people don't think that that's not, top of mind. I also agree that the idea of no developer is not really a fair or reasonable outcome for the tenants, knowing what they need. We've heard, from so many. And finally, I just want to let everybody know, remind everybody that, up to this point, we are not delaying the process. We have not delayed anything. It is going through its regular route. We are still waiting for our response to our comments to the draft EIS, and trying to track down this information while we wait. Just so that, residents of the NYCHA campuses know that all of these conversations are not adding to any kind of delay up to this point. Again, thanks for your comments. I appreciate it. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Get better, get some rest. I'm going to open up to other board members in the room. So Joe, if you want to come up. And I'm going to ask speakers to come to the podium to speak so that he can come to the podium and take my mic so that we can see you on camera.
So from the Housing Committee, a couple things. First is I do urge that the letter be sent to elected officials. It is not uncommon when we have a public agency not acting clearly, or a developer, we ask our elected officials to intervene to make that happen. So that's a standard thing we do. I would suggest that makes sense here because in fact, this is being driven by elected officials supporting a project, right? The second thing is, please just technically in a letter, if we could note not just relocation, but temporary relocation, because that's what this is about, whether that's for renovation or new construction. And also when we say demolition, it should say demolition, new construction, because it's not just demolition, it's new construction. So it's just clear. I do want to note again for the record that that NYCHA has information and can supply it. I was the co-chair of the finance committee of the working group, and they gave detailed information to inform the working group's decision down to what the square footage of construction should be, what the price should be, how much should be paid for rent for Section 8 conversion for RAD. They were specific and detailed. This is a choice. The board has asked, we have not received, because holding information means that we don't have the full picture to understand. And the one piece of information we have got has told us a couple of things. There's a lot of vacant apartments that can be used for relocation. They disclosed that finally. It took us 4 goes to get that. They disclosed what the new Section 8 rents would be. Those are substantially higher than what the working group's information was given, because Related is able to secure much higher RAD rents. Those rents from that financial model, which I talked about at housing, could cover roughly 1.2 billion in a mortgage. That means that could cover renovation. Now, there could be a decision here, a public policy decision to do renovation and new construction, but that should be discussed. So I come to the point that I brought up last meeting, that there should be a slimmed down version of this working group that sits with tenants, community leaders, elected officials, NYCHA, the developer. And by the way, one point, we should not lose the developer. We have no faith in any of NYCHA, the developer, but this can be worked through if they are reined in by the elected officials. Eric Botcher has said over and over, there should be market rate housing only to the extent needed to finance the NYCHA development. And that's the sort of thing, if we sit down, discuss it together, and Hector, I strongly disagree with you on a specific point. And that is in March of 23, I was invited to a meeting representing the board, and a whole plan had been done. And it was our Congress member said, show them the plan. And that was not going to be shown. And that was the full demolition plan. We had never seen it before. So this is a classic bait and switch that we sit in rooms, all of us, and NYCHA tenants are talking about Penn South's not doing this, there's blockers. Everyone's pitted against each other because a developer is interested in creating controversy and division in a community. And at the same time, though, I am still able and willing to work with that developer and with that agency, because this is how the public process works sometimes. So Jeffrey is right on one thing. I do agree here. We should not be jettisoning this developer. And I don't think they're going to walk away for the simple reason those Section 8 rents bring in millions and millions and millions for their use. We have to figure out how to manage it and put it through. So this letter is a great, great letter, just some tweaks in it. And I would definitely recommend this idea of this slimmed down working group.
Thanks, Joe. With the mic there. All right, so we're going to move on to the public comment section. I have the sign-in sheets here from the people in the room. Anybody who's online, if you want to also participate in the public comment, please raise your hand digitally, and Jesse can move you over during the process. Just to sort of summarize, though, as committee members start to think about how we're going to tackle this letter, I do feel like from the conversation that there is a real strong need in this letter to state the fact that we have a distrust in the process, but at the same time, the process has been robust, right? Like there is distrust, but we have had years of dialogue, working group meetings, working group discussions, public participation. So maybe tweaking the language to some degree to express our distrust, but also recognize that it has been very robust. I'm in agreement. It seems that there's an agreement, and we'll open up for other comments from the committee for all points. I'm going to let the public speak. I'm summarizing from what I've interpreted as chair. So the second thing is we definitely need more information. Joe's point about the notably finances. So we need to understand the financing of this project so that we can be better informed about how we decide things. And based on previous communications and letters from the board, the renovations and repairs need to be ongoing during this process, and that has to be resolved immediately so people don't continue to live in these conditions, especially as the 10-year construction process goes on. The things that I see as unsort of resolved that I think we need to have a little bit of a conversation about is to whom we address the letter, to the elected officials or the development team. We should have another conversation about the 50-50 makeup of the lands, whether we want a different number in there. 50-50 is in this letter. Should that be changed? And then let's have a conversation about resetting the project. There's been a number of people who said, let's start all over from scratch, throw the baby out with the bathwater. And others are saying, no, we have somebody we can work with. Let's get this job done. So let's have a conversation about those 3 points. But to start, I'm going to invite the public up to speak. And again, I ask the public to come up, use this microphone at the podium. So you show up on Zoom, and you're going to be given 3 minutes. 2 minutes. I'm sorry, I keep saying 3. 2 minutes because we're going to run out of time. We have the first 3 names on the list, and you can come up here and line up. Roberto Rodriguez, Jacqueline, and Daniel Ramirez. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing names. So Roberto.
Hello. Hey, my name is Roberto Rodriguez. I reside at 420 West 19th Street.
Put the microphone closer to your face.
My name is Roberto Rodriguez, and I reside at 420 West 19th Street. I'm an old-time resident of Chelsea. I grew up on West 26th Street, 229, and the building that's over 100 years old was not torn down, but renovated. It's still there, right next to that big TV studio, which was once a big silent film studio. Anyway, Penn South. I don't know how much of the tenants who were displaced, working class tenants and otherwise, when Penn South was established, but I do remember the brownstones that were there. I also remember a very nice lady who opened the doors to the school children and gave them a place to stay and watch TV and share candy at times and just be a good neighbor. Okay, so now I'm going to make it short. I am opposed to anything that takes down these buildings. They're structurally sound. There's a myth created that they have to be torn down. That's crap. First Houses was built during the Depression. That's public housing. First Houses, it's still there. The building that I grew up in is still there. So the way I'm saying is no demolition. It stays under NYCHA, completely funded by NYCHA. And there's other funding. I would recommend to all of you here to check out the bill that Phil Steck and James Sanders put out that wants to return the stock transfer tax, which generated in 1981 something like $14 billion. And that money was used to fund everything that needed to be done in housing as well as in public schools. So check it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. Jacqueline?
Hi, Jacqueline Lara, Fulton Houses. Yes, we July 12th made a year that we've been coming here fighting against this demolition. And not once did we ever bring a resident here to show how deplorable. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen an apartment yet that's deplorable. And you will actually need a freaking dynamite to just knock down one of our buildings because these buildings are not falling apart. We have the resources. If anything, if any of residents has a problem with their apartment, we know where to send them. But, you know, we have opposing people like, you know, HOU, they should be telling the residents how to solve their problems and where to go to, which, you know, that should be their job. But no, they're telling the residents that no, your apartment can't be fixed unless you do demolition. And that's why you're getting these false testimonies coming over here lying about that. I would do anything in my power to stop this demolition. The survey was a scam, and we all know that all this is a scam. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Ramirez, and Selena's going to translate for us.
My name is Daniel Ramirez, a tenant of the Fulton houses. I've been living here with my wife for 27 years. We've also raised a family here. By now, you know that I do not want a demolition. What you do not know is how deeply affected a demolition would be for us. Both of my sons are autistic. My oldest son has high functioning autism. A demolition would be a disruption, causing increased physical and emotional stress, further agitating the mental state of my son and the rest of my family. Living in a construction site, 16, 20 years, full of constant noise and disruption, will not be the peaceful, harmonious environment that I presently live in, my home. I'm here as one, but I'm speaking for my household of 4. Do not allow our well-being, lives to be sacrificed to service others. Please, I am pleading, my family is pleading, and my FEC teammates, we do not want to be sacrificed. No demolition, no rezoning of Fulton, Elliot, and Chelsea houses. The best, yo no entiendo.
Oh,
I don't understand.
the best project is not demolition for my community, porque es necesario for life. Thank you.
Thank you. Next 3 are Luis, I'm going to mess this name up, Sanambucci from 419 West 17th, Alicia Cruz, and then another name I can't read, Lyle Ott from 352 West 20th. So Lewis, no Lewis. He just said on record, no demolition. Okay, next is Alicia. Alexa, I'm sorry.
Hi,
I can't read.
good afternoon, good evening.
I can't read this.
I agree and I disagree with a lot of stuff that the board said.
Can you please put the microphone close to
I-
your mouth so people can
Hi.
hear? Thank you.
Good afternoon. I will always, till the day that I die, will say save Section 9 and save NYCHA. We have had repairs of NYCHA. They're doing repairs right now. NYCHA is doing repairs on the building, not RadPat. I don't want RadPat because RadPat is a private developer, which is Section 8, which is temporarily for 20 years, and people are going to be out in the street homeless. They're playing with us. They're playing with the low income family. Not everybody makes a 6-digit salary here. There's other people that don't live in housing that don't make a lot of money too. So I don't understand why they say, yes, in my backyard, when there's a lot of people that have problems. What's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to NYCHA? You guys don't care. You passed the hot potato like, like nothing, like, you ignore us. And that's not right. We're human beings and we're American citizens, and we have rights to live in New York City. Where we're going to go? To a different city? To a different state? No, you can't go nowhere in these 5 boroughs because the rents are sky high. And a lot of people are low income, and I'm one of them. Okay? I worked all my life, and I can't get in a good apartment. I want to live lovely, yes, but I'll settle for what God gave me. That's what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lydia, and then next is Renee and then Wanda Luana.
Hi, my name is Lydia Andre from 352.
You need to move the microphone closer to your mouth so people can hear you.
Hi, my name is Lydia Andre from 352 West 20th Street. I really want to thank the Land Use Committee for their tremendous work. I think this letter is great. I know how much energy and effort has gone into this. And I just want to comment a little bit on why it needs to go to the elected officials. You know, Jerry Nadler's a powerful senator, but he shouldn't be deciding the fate of this campus. I don't think we have to be shy or reticent and worry about losing a seat at the table. Last time I checked, they work for us. They're doing a lousy job. I sat through listening to 15 hours of City of Yes, and I was most impressed by the councilmen who were there representing their constituents. And it occurred to me that the councilmen in whose districts developers are most active were the ones who weren't there representing their constituents. So we need to press on our elected officials. They are unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, decision makers in this matter. I really respect Joe's idea that we should take a break and go back to getting more parties and the right parties at the table. We shouldn't be afraid to speak up on behalf of NYCHA residents and on behalf of the whole community. Thanks.
Thank you. So Renee, Wanda Luana, and Salinas, why don't you come on up here and queue up? And again, state your name on microphone for the Zoom.
My name is Renee. Once again, we're back here. I really don't know what to say because quite frankly, this makes no sense. If NYCHA is to do the repairs, and they said they would, why are we here? If it was about to get us repairs, then they said they would do it. Now, everyone keeps saying the same thing. Everyone was at the table. That's an outright lie, Hector, alternative truth, whatever you want to say. These things were held on Zoom during a pandemic. I assure you, we were not thinking that this was going on. We ended up finding out it was going on. So the lack of transparency was there from the beginning. We didn't know this was a pack rad. We ended up finding out later. Everything was about Fulton houses, then Elliot and Chelsea Edition comes onto the table. So everyone says there's transparency, there hasn't been. The fact that everyone that part of the community board is meeting with related Essence and the elected officials, and that's basically a violation of open meetings law. No transparency. People, you're right, there's not going to be any trust. At this point, there isn't. We know Essence has lied. We know Related has lied. We know just about everyone has lied or have done their own version of the truth. A working group, I don't know if that's even feasible at this point or if there's going to be a lot of trust in it. The way it worked before, there were meetings. The tenants were not told there were meetings. If they found out were the meetings, they weren't let in. And I only knew about one meeting because Marnie actually caught it on video. So we know about that one, and that's how we knew. So when everyone keeps telling us that, that's ridiculous. Everyone keeps saying we're going to make sure these developments are supported by the money. You have infill on Elliot, 401 West 25th Street. You have an infill at Fulton. Where's the money? What was done with those funds?
Thank you, Renee.
You're not going to be here. Eric Botcher, all these people will not be here.
Thank you.
We will be. Hope we're living.
Thank you. Name and address. Name and address into the mic so they can hear it.
Okay. Hi, my name is Luana Green and I live in Penn South. I am a resident of Penn South and have been a resident of Penn South for 15 years. But I also have been a resident of Elliot Chelsea houses for 50 years. I lived in New York City housing for 50 years. The reason why I moved to Penn South is because I got called off a waiting list and was able to leave something for my son for his future, some inheritance. So that's why I moved. Otherwise, I would have stayed at Elliot Chelsea houses because I loved Elliot Chelsea houses. I love the community. And I want to say, I don't know what happened. We never had those issues with repairs. We never had any of those issues. My son was 15 when we moved to Penn South, and he never got tested for any lead ever. and he had a test every year because that was required. So I just want to say, I think you guys have it all. I think the ones that I've heard speaking already have the clue of what's going on here. And I don't need to say land grab and so on so much. There's so much going on in this city, and there's so few enclaves for people of low and middle income. They took away the stores, they're taking away the hospitals, they're taking away everything. Now they want to take somebody's home. There are so many vacant apartments. If you want to repair apartment that's that bad, then move them to one of those vacant apartments and repair their apartment and let them come out. I'm telling you, I don't want to give Penn South a bad name, but those houses, Elliot houses, are strong. They're fortified. Yes, there's infrastructure problems because New York City has infrastructure problems. But I've read that in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, in several areas in New York City Housing Authority has money to do renovation and repairs with other developers. So what's going on with Chelsea? Let's look at Hudson Yards. Let's look at the area and let's get a clue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luana. I have Salinas on my list and then Gloria. Did Gloria show up? Is Gloria here? Okay. After Salinas, we have Carol Ott and then Tom Lunka. If Carol and Tom want to come up and queue up. Go ahead, Salinas.
After listening.
And again, I'm sorry, name and address for the record. Yes, they did. Well, at least I asked them all to.
Salinas Miranda, Elliot Buildings. After listening to City of Yes public hearing, I realize and see the importance of affordable housing. Higher income bracket earners should not have to spend over half their paycheck to keep a roof over their head. Everyone deserves affordable housing, but under what means? By sacrificing an already existing community? By having a low-income class give up their public housing Section 9 security? Who are we servicing in the demolition proposal? The ones who are truly being serviced and catered to is related companies. They already have mixed income buildings and high luxury buildings in Chelsea alone. This includes the Hudson Yard. In the Hudson Yard proposal, related promised over 300 units of affordable housing, and they have yet to make these units available for the public. How is related going to get handed the keys of our Fulton, Elliot, and Chelsea development when they don't follow through on their promises? Hector Vasquez just proved in his testimony that Alliance Security, the ones hired by Related, are not accomplishing anything on our campus. It's all show. We were not invited to any meetings. Darlene Waters, our Elliot Chelsea TA leader, never made any efforts to have the tenants involved. No posters, no flyers, only a hand-selected tenants and only 6 of them from my development. Hector Vasquez is right. This proposal has been biased. It's been biased up until we started getting involved and exposing truth. Hector Vasquez, you said there's meeting minutes. Provide them. Provide the meetings where demolition was first initiated. There's been many secret meetings. Robert Gotham, Jerry Nadler's assistant, admitted himself that demolition has been discussed for many, 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 many years. This has been plotted way before it was ever introduced to the tenants. Repairs can get done.
Thank you.
Tenants-
Appreciate your time. Before you start, Carol, just a reminder to folks online. I see 4 hands up. If there's anybody else online, please raise your hand. Carol?
My name is Carol Ott.
Sorry, Carol, microphone closer so people can hear.
My name is Carol Ott, and I've lived in Chelsea since 1978 and have spent my career as a journalist covering the city's building stock that has been converted to co-ops condos. I am appalled at the NYCHA development process and the lack of transparency. As one who is knowledgeable about what it takes to renovate, bring buildings up to code, and raise funds to do so, I am saddened at the process and the fact that our community's elected officials all seem to be on board with demolition, despite the lack of transparency. Without seeing the physical needs assessment that the developers are basing their plans on, how can anyone even consider demolition? I support the spirit of the draft letter. I'm concerned that the intensity that would demand answers is not present.
Thank you, Carol. Tom?
So Carol and I yesterday surveyed both Fulton and Elliot Chelsea land, public land, and we found 370 tall trees, most of which appear to be over 60 years old, and 200 small shrub-like trees on the Fulton campus. But the 370, well, the 161 tall trees on the Fulton campus and 209 tall trees on the Elliot Chelsea. I'd also, so I would ask that there be something in this letter talking about these trees and the environmental cost of demolishing them and how they won't meet the New York City adopted environmental goals. I would also ask that the letter mention the 197A plan, which was drafted roughly 30 years ago and is the basis for all rezoning since. I would also ask that the letter include a request to look at other financing options other than building private market rate housing on public land. And lastly, this whatever happens on these properties, NYCHA has said at the Citizens Public Commission meeting, which you can find online, that this is going to be a model for the rest of the city. So let's get this right this time. I agree, no demolition. The buildings are great. They form a beautiful unified landscape. Carol and I sat in the landscape for hours yesterday, and it's lovely. And so I don't think it needs demolition. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. We're now going to move to people online. We have Maria Ortiz, followed by Roberta Gelb. And Jesse will move you over. Once you move over, we'll ask you to unmute and put your camera on. Maria, you're on. You have two. Yeah, there you go.
All
Unmute.
right, all
Thank you.
right. I think I'm ready now. I think I'm unmuted, right?
Thank you. Go ahead, Maria.
Thank you, Paul. So my name is Maria Ortiz. I'm actually co-chair of Housing, Health, and Human Services with Joe Restuccia. I have been listening for a while, and I would say that I mostly agree with a lot of the points that were already mentioned. I want to highlight 4 things. I do agree that someone pointed out related to preservation in the letter that the language should be stronger. I think that's really important. The working group being, it came up, and I've heard this months ago, and I thought it was a wonderful idea. Having a short-term working group to discuss this project again is a good idea. And having more, someone else mentioned more affordable housing than's proposed. And the other thing that I want to highlight, and these 4 things that I'm highlighting are things that I think are really significant and important. The other thing, the last thing is the repairs that need, I believe they need to begin as soon as possible. We've been talking about them. To me, it seems like a year, it could be more than a year. And if any of us were living in a home where the repairs needed to be done, it would be unacceptable for us. And I think that NYCHA and related, in essence, need to take care of that as soon as possible. We've been discussing it for far too long. And then the other 3 points, Paul, you mentioned that the committee is going to be discussing. I just want to mention 2 things. The letter, I think it makes sense to address the letter to electeds, given the issues we've already had with the developers. Obviously, they can be CC'd, but I think it makes sense to address the letter to the electeds. And the resetting and starting from the beginning. I'm not sure how that is a really good idea, and I think that that's actually not fair to the tenants. And those are my comments for today. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Maria. Roberta Gelb, and then we'll follow by John Mudd. Roberta, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, I've been a resident of Chelsea since 1977. I'm here representing the Chelsea Reform Democratic Club. We gave a resolution to Jesse, and I'm hoping that the rest of the committee has it, and that because of time, I'm just going to read the last four things or three things. Be it resolved that CRDC, the Chelsea Reform Democratic Club, urges a thorough reevaluation of the proposed NYCHA Chelsea campuses project, emphasizing the need for comprehensive and inclusive community input. And further be it resolved that CRDC calls for a careful examination of the survey methodology and advocates for alternative solutions that prioritize the integrity of the campuses and the rights of the tenants, as well as the well-being and stability of the Chelsea community. And further be it resolved that CRDC urges HUD, NYCHA, and HPD to consider a no demolition alternative where public housing properties stay under federal ownership and tenants remain under the statute of Section 9 of the United States Housing Act of 1937, and other financial methods are utilized to rehabilitate Fulton and Elliot Chelsea and Chelsea Addition houses. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. Next, we'll go to John Mudd, followed by Marnie Halassa. John, you have your 2 minutes.
Hi, John Mudd here, Midtown South Community Council. The city of Yes, Penn area, the Midtown upzoning, the demolition of NYCHA, it's all the same stuff. They're stripping basically our resources away. And for us to sit around and discuss deals with developers, which are an existential threat to our living, the land value alone, you've heard them on these Zooms. They're dribbling at the fact that it might get some property. The land is very valuable. We haven't fixed the property. We haven't held the city accountable. And you're going to take a NYCHA who's been a bad manager and let them make sweetheart deals with each other, but they're related with the developer. And it's appalling. It's appalling that we allow this to go on. It's appalling that we're sitting around making deals about people's lives and homes. Okay, that's where they live. That's where they reside. That's where they thrive. And for them to put them in such a frustrating position with a landlord that's not taking care of the building. The city's NYCHA is a bad landlord. Why are we letting that go on? They need to be taken off the landlord list, and we need to find some other way of managing it, not do a deal with a developer.
Thank you, John. Next, we're going to go to Marnie Halassa, followed by Susan Ackoff. Marnie?
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Your 2 minutes is starting.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say, well, numerous times, myself and other activists and other public housing tenants have been stopped by the police when actually trying to enter a public meeting. So no, those tenants who are opposed to demolition and privatization are never welcomed, and actually they're shunned. So that's a point that needs to be clear. And also, like, I've been present where tenants like Alexa and Salinas were stopped, by Miguel and Lenny Rosado and big policemen from PSA4 from entering public meetings at the Fulton Senior Center, which is a total violation of NYCHA's laws. So, it needs to be made clear that the system really is rigged against tenants, and there's really never any redress for those wrongs. But again, like the real issue, like a lot of tenants are saying, it's not just no demolition, it's to save Section 9 federal funding, because under Section 8, the rents increase, there are very strict house rules, and evictions skyrocket, like in the Ocean Bay development. And I don't know what y'all believe in, but if you guys believe in a higher power. But I think the most important thing I can say is that there really is an accounting of everyone's behavior in this life, and it's called the Akashic Record. So look it up. And if you don't act with a moral conscience, and if you don't, try to, make the world a better place, there will be spiritual consequences. So that's important too. So I hope everybody has a conscience. Thank you.
Thank you, Marnie. Next, we'll have Susan Ackoff, followed by Susan Imigat, and then that's the end of our speaking session. So Susan, your 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Susan Ackoff, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I live in Penn South, and I'm also on the executive board of the Chelsea Reform Democratic Club, and I find it totally outrageous that we are considering, even considering that Related, who is out to make as much money as they can and have as much high rates for apartments, and anybody, they're not interested in helping people out. They're not interested in having rates that people can afford. And I think that it's outrageous that we're dealing with Related. But besides that, I feel that the tenants need to be able to retain their apartments, that repairs need to be made for them, and that if there are existing empty apartments, those need to be filled in the proper way, but we cannot have demolition. We need to have repair and keep the people there. Do not destroy the whole footprint of the place, with the housing, with trees and places where people work and live for a long time. It's just totally outrageous. So that's what I have to say. Please keep us going, and please do not no demolition for Chelsea housing, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next, we'll go to Susan Imagat, and I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. You need to unmute, though. Susan, you need to unmute. Susan.
My name is Susan Emergott, and I've lived in Chelsea since I was a teenager. I've lived in Penn South. I also was a librarian at Muhlenberg Branch Library, and also at PS 11 and the High School for the Humanities. So I feel I'm a real neighborhood person. Unfortunately, the NYCHA houses find themselves on such expensive property now, with the Hudson Yards in the north, and the High Line on the west, and then the Meatpacking District and Google. And so it's very attractive to developers to want to get rid of the NYCHA residents. And also, I think all those wealthy people don't want to see people that are poor. They don't want to be reminded that they're poor people who live in the city. I think, I'm against demolition. The demolition proposal comes at the expense of 4,500 residents who live in NYCHA. Instead of displacing residents from their homes and communities, the city, which has spent billions of dollars supporting migrants, can find money to rehabilitate buildings and provide security. In addition, New York State recently added the right to clean air to its constitution. Are we in Chelsea not granted this right? Currently, the air quality in Chelsea is one of the worst in the city. The proposed demolition and construction would further diminish air quality. Isn't there already enough demolition and construction going on in our neighborhood or nearby areas? We will soon see the demolition and construction of the Port Authority, the construction of the western half of the Hudson Yards, and a new Penn Station. Let's not diminish the air quality by demolishing Chelsea NYCHA houses. Also, repurposing old buildings.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. That ends the public comment session of tonight's meeting. And thank you all very much. This is, robust, and it's healthy and strong. I appreciate it. So going back to the agenda item of the letter, we'd like to try to reach some resolution tonight. Now, keep in mind that this letter was drafted because we have multiple other letters. We have our draft EIS comments that list many, 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 many items on it. This letter comes out of the conversations we had at previous meetings to say we want to push, instead of saying what doesn't exist or what doesn't, we want to push for what our committee wants the board to say. These are the top priorities of what needs to be addressed. If we're going to redevelop a major campus of residential housing in our neighborhood, we need to establish some goals. And this is what that letter is really trying to do. So keep in mind, we have all of the draft EIS letters out. We have all of the renovation or repair letter out. So this is just on this issue. And again, what I'd like to try to do is have David, I see your hand. What I'd like to do is have a very focused conversation about the three main things that I haven't heard consensus on yet. One is on the letter going to the elected officials or to the developer. One is on the ratio of market rate versus affordable housing, 50-50. And the third is on the concept of resetting the entire project, or maybe creating a working group, or continuing to work the way we are. Okay, so those are the three main topics I'd like to stay focused on. So
can I just add, Paul, that required by law will be a response to our comments for the draft scope of work. It's just not yet clear when we will receive that information, but that is required by law for them to proceed in any way, shape, and form with an EIS. So that is forthcoming. We expected it by now, but still not here yet. So just wanted to add that.
All right, can you pat? All right, so David.
I strongly favor what Joe Restuccia has proposed of reconvening the original working group 3 to 6 months, be flexible, look for community consensus on the issue of writing to the electeds or not. I'll back up a little bit. No one, first of all, is talking about dropping out of the environmental review process. My fear, though, is that the way it's going, we're going to find ourselves down the line looking at the same two alternatives with no new non-demolition alternative. And we're just going to be left with opportunities to tweak that, which would be really awful. I think the longer we go down that road without alerting our elected officials, the more likely is to become a reality. I have had meetings. I had a face-to-face one-on-one meeting with Eric Botcher, and I gave him all the arguments you've heard about why it is inconceivable that it would cost as much to renovate as to replace the buildings. He didn't have an answer for me. He went back to the point about the deplorable living conditions. I met with Congressman Nadler's office recently, and it was the same thing. There was no response to how could this possibly be that it's going to cost as much to renovate, and the deplorable living conditions were brought up again. Jeffrey, I don't think it's correct that that NYCHA could go ahead with the as-of-right scheme tomorrow. There's a NEPA review process. It's National Environmental Policy Act because this is a federal property. And the person who is closest to that is, of course, Jerry Nadler. So they're required by law to respond to comments in an accountable way. I think we've got a better chance of getting accountable responses if Jerry Nadler isn't bamboozled. I also heard from Jerry Nadler's office that all the elected officials are behind it, as if that was a reason we should drop this. Well, we need them not to be behind it. They need to hear from us. I don't see any benefit to not sharing with them. And the whole thing of dealing exclusively with NYCHA, I mean, if you're getting mugged, don't complain to the mugger, call a cop. I can't believe that we won't have more leverage with the elected officials on our side. So I'm definitely for including them. Thank you.
Just a couple of just to clarify a couple of things, David. You said that you support Joe's concept of a working group. So that is not a resetting. That's working with the current development team. And you had previously taken a position to say you want to scratch and start all over again. So have you now migrated to let's do a working group, let's work with the team we have, let's figure out a solution?
That seems to be the best way to go. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That's good clarification. And then the second clarifying point I would make is that all of our communication goes to elected officials. They all see everything. They have all been part of these conversations. So to say that the elected officials aren't aware of these letters is also a little bit misleading because all of them have seen it, and no elected official, when it receives a letter from anybody, is statutorily required to respond. So the notion that sending them a letter is going to force a response is also a little bit unclear to me.
I get that. But, I want us to be addressing them directly. It's probably not appropriate to say to NYCHA, people are infuriated by this. It's much more.
4 people who said they want to send to the developer. You're one of the ones, the 4 that said to the elected officials, your point is on record.
Right. And I'm not saying that it has to be one or the other. I just want to make sure there is a letter to the electeds because I want them to be put on the spot. And it's different if they're simply left on the sidelines if we're just copying them. And as I said, they're still cheerleading from the sidelines.
That's debatable, David, and that's why we're having the debate. So Inga, you're next.
Yeah, I also feel strongly that a letter should go to the elected officials. They should be held accountable. They are supposed to be representing the entire community, and they're sort of shirking that responsibility. So I think if we send a letter directly to them, it holds them more accountable. We can say, we sent you a letter, you weren't CC'd, you did not respond. This is what we feel. I do like what Joe said last time about the working group. And I also like the idea that his calculations for what it would cost to renovate the apartments based on the rents coming in, so that there is no demolition possibly needed, and highly likely not. I think there needs to be renovations, not demolition. That's my feeling. I don't think we should be trusting the real estate industry, and NYCHA has not been forthcoming, so I'm going to reiterate my fact that they've been hiding and possibly lying. So that's what I'm.
So to address that, keep in mind that we are including in this letter, new language to very strengthen the fact that we need to see the finances. So people standing up and saying demolition is cheaper than renovation, or renovation is cheaper than demolition, until we see finances, which we have not seen, which we have requested, I think that's a very important component of what we need to bring into this, is so that everybody has the same data to work from. And Inga, I'm going to follow up on your comment that the notion of a Joe working group, that's also a shift in your position overall, because before you were like reset. Now are you migrating towards the let's do a working group with the team we have in place and see if we can't find a solution.
That's the best reset we're going to get right now. Okay. It appears. So I'm going for whatever's best. And that seems to be the best reset we can have, is to go back to the table, hold them accountable. They have not been honest.
Okay.
There are a lot of things at stake.
But the notion of throwing it out and starting all over again versus working
that would be my
change for
preference,
you,
but
so I
that's not
appreciate
going to
that.
happen.
Okay, thank you.
It would be my preference, but it's not going to happen. So
thank you. Rodney, I see your hand up. And I see Viren and Betty, I see your hands up online. I'll come to you next after Rodney.
Thanks. I think the letter should go to the elected officials. And if so, I think we should strengthen paragraph 6 that talks about the survey. And the reason for that is that the survey is the instrument that's being used to say that they're conveying the wishes of the residents of Chelsea Mark, to say that they want the residents want demolition. So if we could be a little more explicit about our questioning the survey, why did it take us a year to get the result when that information was being shared with elected officials? I also think we should go with the Joe model of a working group.
Thanks, Rodney. I will clarify. Ed, I'm going to go to these two online, and then I didn't see your hand up, so I will see you next. Rodney, I wanted just from my interpretation of the survey, when I saw the results, it showed a 50-50 response rate on that. So I'm questioning how you get to the conclusion that the survey is being interpreted as pro-demolition when the survey came out at 50-50.
So I was in a meeting with related senior officials about 2 weeks ago on an unrelated matter on the 74th floor, where their senior officials were using the survey as the example of that. This is what the residents want. It was the voice of the residents. So it was an unrelated matter, but it came up, and these were the chief operating officer, Andrew Rawson, was in there, but someone more senior than him was also using the survey as the tool to say, we're doing what the residents of Chelsea and Fulton
Okay,
want.
so maybe what we do is clarify the results of the survey, which is 50-50. So that's okay. That's important. I'm going to go to Viren and Betty, and then Pam. Viren?
Yeah, very quickly. I think this letter has been discussed over the last 6 months or more. I think it's kind of a foregone conclusion that we want this letter to go to the electeds. So I think that should happen ASAP. We've tossed it around for a very, very, very long time. So that's my sort of big take on it. Second thing is demolition should be sort of reconsidered, and preservation should be considered very strongly, because I think, as David and everybody else has pointed out, these buildings are in a sound shape. Utilities can be fixed up. Costs can be much lower. So that definitely should be put back in place. And lastly, affordability component has to be really emphasized. This is public land. We're losing Section 9 rental housing and replacing it with Section 8. That should be totally unacceptable to any good New Yorker. New York is at the forefront of public housing. New York had the first public housing project known as First Houses from 1934. We should be actually talking about preservation much more than simply demolition. Lastly, I think I missed my sort of I missed my sort of line of thinking, but I do believe that this has been discussed over and over and over. So I think I would make a very earnest request to the committee to move forward and send this letter to the elected officials and make our opinion known to them that we are very much practically not for demolition. Thank you.
Thank you, Varen. And again, I don't think we've taken a position on demolition or no demolition yet. So that's, I think that came out of the process. I'm going to Betty and then Pamela.
Yes,
So-
thank you. You hear me? Yeah?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Betty.
Quickly. Number one, who should we send it to? The elected officials, as I said earlier. Number two, the 50-50 affordable. Oh, I think I agree with a number of people. It should be higher affordable units. I don't know exactly what the percent should be, whether it's 60, 70, I don't know, but something more weighted to affordable. And I do like Joe's kind of resetting the working group. Thank you. Oh, wait, I just had one other thought while I was sitting here, that once the letter goes to the elected officials, I think the leadership of Community Board 4 or particularly interested people need to meet with the elected officials. You need to have a meeting with them. So let's keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Pamela?
Well, and I agree entirely with what Betty has said. I second it all. I think it is important with her last point about having a meeting with the elected officials, and the sooner the better. With the leadership of CB4 should have a strong voice here. There seems to be another conversation going on. I absolutely agree that the letter should go to the elected officials, and I think I would like to see a hand count at some point for among this group.
We will take a vote,
I
promise.
Are you keeping a list of those pro and con?
I am keeping.
I haven't heard anybody say they don't want anybody to send
there were 4 people who said they did not want the letter. So if you didn't hear that, there were
So
4
who was that?
people. I am taking proficient. Vera, and I'd also recommend that if you lose your train of thought, the reason I write everything down is because I lose my train of thought all the time. So there were, in fact, people who did say they wanted to go to the development team, and there were, in fact, people who said the elected officials. That's why I opened up the debate on this topic, and then we will hold a vote like we do on every letter we do for the committee. Yes.
I bring this up only because I heard you say a few moments ago that you had in your head a count of 4 in favor and 4 opposed to the elected officials, and I already knew there were more than that in favor. So I'm just wanted.
Pamela, I assure you,
Thank
there will
you.
be a vote on each of these topics, and we will vote on the letter to have a vote. Yes, 100%.
Very good. Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Greg?
I just want to say, because I made reference to the elected officials. The letter as it currently stands is CC'd to the elected officials. If the idea is to send it to the elected officials, I mean, in other words, you're going to make the 2 line, or addressing this to the elected officials. I would just suggest that perhaps it would be beneficial to reformat and remake this letter to be very specific about what it is that we want the elected officials to react to respond to, and act on. As has been noted around this table, in some cases, those elected officials have been very clear that they think this is moving forward, and they're in support of this moving forward. So if we're going to put a letter forward, I would just suggest this letter is constructed, I think, for a development team. If we want to make it for elected officials, it might be beneficial to reset it to be very clear about what our expectations are for them, Because again, Jeffrey, to go back to your point about a seat at the table, in my experience with electeds, you have to communicate perhaps differently to have a seat at their table. Again, not going to object to getting this in the hands, not going to throw any more wrenches, just simply going to say, for the sake of moving forward, if we're talking to electeds, I'm not sure this is the best way to get our messaging across.
I see Betty, your hand went up and down. Are you
I'm done.
down? Okay, Viren, I saw your hand come back up.
Yeah, I think that was precisely the point I was trying to remember. I think that we should make a decision whether it's going to be same letter that goes both places, or we write two separate letters, one to electeds and the second one goes to the development team. And I think the distinction between the two should be very clearly spelled out. Paul, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I heard you. I was reading the room to see if there were any other reactions or hands going up. And so, and it's hard for me to see the screen from where I'm standing. So, okay. Bert.
In response, we're sending it to the electeds. I think Joe made reference before. We're missing information. We need to come to any kind of decision. We need a lot more information, a lot more finances. And we're saying to the electeds, basically, hey, get it for us. You want us to be out there, engaged in this process? Get this information for us. We've been trying and trying, and we haven't got it. Let's see what you can do.
All right. So on just that topic, I think I'm reading enough votes in the room and Jeffrey wants to comment on this. So once Jeffrey's comments are made, I would entertain a motion on to whom we address the letter. And so I would entertain that motion after Jeffrey speaks.
No, I just want to make sure that we are cognizant of the fact that there's multiple interests, and a lot of the comments seem to be skewing for one over the other. We have not heard from the groups that usually show up tonight sort of speaking in favor of this. So I just want to acknowledge that fact. Their presence has been as consistent as the opposition. I'm not discrediting any of the opposition or huffs in the room. I'm hearing accordingly. But I do just want to call out the fact that what was that, Joe?
Please, just no interaction with the audience. Thank you.
And I just do think it's notable that not notable. I think it's important we acknowledge that the demand for representation of our electeds by certain folks is a similar demand being, sort of expected by others. And I think that's really important to think about as we frame what is a desire for consensus in this process. And so just want to throw that out there before we take these votes. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Jeffrey. And I'm just going to say my comment as a committee member. I'm also in favor of sending it to the development team because that's who we work with. That's where letters typically go. That's where we copy elected officials and we follow up with elected officials. I'd also make note that one of the people who can't vote on this is a NYCHA resident. And I personally always defer to those people first on my consideration of votes. So that's where I personally stand. So I'm willing to entertain a motion on to whom the letter gets addressed. No, who's making the motion? To say what?
Paul, I just want to say, if I might, that it's actually two members of our committee who are NYCHA residents who have to vote P&E. So, it's really important that everyone keeps that in mind, that the two people who are on our committee who live in NYCHA housing at these two sites are not able to vote.
And Mike, I don't know if Mike took a position on whether to send the letter to the elected officials or to the development team. I know that Hector did express his opinion on that, and I don't know where Mike stood on that question. That was just again, I was speaking as my committee voice, not my chairing voice. So, Inga.
I will make a motion that it should be sent to the elected officials.
And I saw David second that. Okay, so we have a motion to change the current version of the letter to have it sent to the elected officials. Not exactly sure which list of elected officials we're going to send that to. All. All right, we'll figure that out. Okay, all in favor of the motion of sending the letter to the elected officials, please raise your hand and keep it up because it's going to be an important vote count. Marty's hand is up. Who we send the letter to. The edited revised letter right now, we're just the question about whether to send it to the elected officials or the development team. It will be copied to either one. It's the address line. We've had a conversation about who it gets addressed to. Okay, anybody, Betty, if you could raise, Betty and Vera, your hands can go down. Anybody opposed to the motion to sending the letter directly to elected officials, but rather leave it the way it is in the draft form? Carrie can't vote.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
I'm
she's
opposed.
yes.
Do I need to put on my camera? Oh my God. I'm here.
Brad, are you on?
Brad, are you voting? And Mike.
I'm confused. Are we not sending to? Why can't they be sent to both at the same time
It will be. This is the
instead
address
of a
line.
CC? That's what I don't get.
Because
Why can't it be sent to the developer and the elected officials? Why does it got to be one or the other?
Ultimately, everyone gets it anyway.
Oh, I understand that, Paul. What I'm
It's
trying
the
to
question
understand
of the tone at the beginning of the letter to the elected officials. There was commentary about elected officials. We need your help because we're not getting answers. Development team, you're not answering our questions. So it's just a slight shift in the beginning tone. So Brad, are you going to vote on this? Brad,
just a point of information that there's a majority of people voting yes so far.
Yeah, so we can just move. We can move.
I think that's fair to say. I think
okay, so
just for the record, there's 3 people voting present, not eligible, regardless.
No, I'm going to call P&E. So I'm trying to get through all the votes. Yes, no, abstain. Any abstentions? I'm going to call that one fast. And then P&Es. I see 3 P&Es.
Jeffrey, Hector,
and Mike Noble are P&E. So that motion passes. It will be a letter addressed to the elected officials, copying the development team, which will shift the beginning statement. Elected officials, please help us versus development team, you haven't been helping us. So we'll get to that. Next topic, on the reset of the project issue that has come up about a discussion. My sense is that people are saying the notion of let's get the working group to focus in, take a sort of a breather from the process, work with the current development team, work with NYCHA, work with community leaders, create a group that can just step back for a minute and just pause, review the status, figure out where we are, gather the data, do all that. So rather than just saying, eliminate the entire process, we're going to do a revised working group to try to tackle the issues, but work towards a solution with NYCHA and related. No, this is a trimmed down working group that has slightly different voices in it. It's a very focused group to say, this was the RFP, this is what has happened. How can we, this is the letter of topics that we are concerned about. We want to make sure that these things happen in the new development. How can we accomplish this goal, given that there is an RFP out there that has been changed and NYCHA has said they are all within the constraints of the RFP to change it to the plan they have. Clearly, that is not the plan we want. So it's how do we find that middle ground and work with the people that are already in place that have been working on this for years, rather than starting the whole process over again, which could add 3, 5, 8 years to the process, leaving people in NYCHA in this untenuous situation. So, Greg.
The only thing I would add to that, again, I appreciate the way you frame that. The only thing I would say, though, is that any additional time taken to focus on resetting a steering conversation should not be used to further delay necessary repairs.
I think that is a consensus. I think there's no objection to that statement. The repairs and renovations also we've been fighting on aggressively, and HHHS is taking up that issue under a separate letter. So yes, 100%, Greg. I think everyone's in agreement on that one. Okay, so someone want to make a motion to say that we ask the elected officials to lead this letter? Now, keep in mind, this letter is going to elected officials. So the tone of the letter is asking the elected officials to create a trimmed down working group and a focus group to find a solution with the existing team. Can I have such a motion?
I make the motion.
Viren makes the motion, and I have Bert on the second. All those in favor? I just want to get their vote. Okay. Carrie is a yes. Brad, I still don't have a vote from. Betty and Marty.
My hand's up. I'm a yes. My hand's up.
Okay. Brad, you need to turn your camera on and show your face on the votes, please. And Betty, you can put your hand down. I see you. Carrie and Marty, you can put your hands down. Vera, and I can put your hand down. Brad. There we go. Brad, say yes. Thank you. Hand is up. Anybody opposed? Any opposition to the motion? Any abstentions on the motion? Any present not eligible on the motion?
Three of us, Jeffrey,
Mike,
Hector, and Mike.
Okay, very good. We have a few more minutes left, so we didn't really tackle the third topic, which was the 50-50 component. I think within the letter, there is some language around 50-50, but provide some moderate income, providing that's what's needed to finance the construction of the new NYCHA housing. So that framework seems to be in line with things, but it came up a couple of points, so I just want to open that up for further conversation. Inga?
Yeah, I think the 50-50 should be taken out completely. We shouldn't even give a number like that. I think Joe had a better suggestion for language, and maybe he wants to chime in as.
Yeah, the language in the letter does say that already. It's only to the extent necessary to finance
Right.
the development.
So I think we
of the
should
NYCHA
not
project.
put 50-50 in there. I don't think we should even suggest a percentage. We want it to be exactly that. We don't want to put out a number and be tied to it.
But what if it's a really low percentage?
Yeah.
That we would end up with of affordability if there's still going to be new housing.
Right,
I also
that's-
want to say that actually came from the original working group.
I'm sorry, please, people in the room, there's side commentary that
Just
makes it difficult to
70-30.
hear.
I mean, then I
Somebody
would
does.
say something like 70 affordable, 30 market. That would be the most I could even think about. 50-50 is ridiculous. I mean, I would like.
You're looking at me like I'm trying to find what others think. You're okay, Inga, your position is very clear. You said 0 to start. Now you're saying 70. Now you're saying 90. So you're not happy with 50-50. So let's see if other people have other suggestions. Because right now the language presented by the conversations we've had previously on this committee, the language written by the co-chairs says 50-50, and it's for a specific reason of that is an attainable number, so we don't fall below 50% is the concern. Because with mandatory inclusionary housing, it's only 30%. 30% is typically our position on housing projects across the city and across our district. So 50 is a step up from our previous positions. So
Public property. This is totally different.
anybody else have any comments to make on this? See Viren and Betty, I see your hands up. So Viren, then Betty.
Very quickly, I think you could probably say not less than 70-30, in line with what may be required financially to make up the revenue required for conservation of public housing units and the whole project.
Betty?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking we could say at least 50%. And then something blah, blah, blah. You know, I mean, I actually personally think it should be
Betty,
higher than 50%.
Betty, if you ever sent a letter that said blah, 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 you would be the first one to send in
You would
edits
never.
correcting that.
Sorry. I'm getting tired here.
So I think it's important, I think, to recognize the point of what we're trying to say here is that we want more affordability than we typically get in a development project. And we typically go for 30. 50% seems to be a number that would work. If we say it has to be a minimum of 70% and then they can't do the financing because we've taken that position, then that kills the project. I don't know if that's worth it to me. So maybe I think Betty's suggestion of at least 50% makes a stronger statement without locking us into a specific.
And maybe just a suggestion to that, Paul, is adding and within the realm of making the project financially viable based on sort of the meeting the ability to renovate, rebuild, what have you. I think tying those two together might be our safest bet if we want to make a number on the table.
And I also want to add that I've said this 4 times so far already tonight is we want to see the financing scheme for this. So we're making these decisions about how much affordability, not affordability to finance this, but we don't have what the numbers are. So I think that for us to say 50% is a significant step up from our normal 30%, and that we say at least 50%, and that it's it depends on the financing scheme. And if we look at financing, this new working group is going to say something higher because we're going to look at the financing then, and we can make a determination. So I think that at least 50% is the recommendation from Betty, and that seems to be a pretty strong position. I see David's hand go up.
My hand is up, Paul.
Okay, I'm sorry, Carrie. I can't,
That's
camera up, I
okay.
can't see your hand.
I know, I understand.
No worries. I'll call on you.
I just, okay.
Carrie, you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead, Dave.
50% was the original RFP. And I don't think this letter should be about changing that kind of rule. I think it should be calling BS on the estimate and proposing the reconvening of the original working group rather than jiggering with the numbers from what they were in the original RFP. And also, the more affordable you've got compared to market rate, the more they can justify building. And we also have an issue of how big is this whole thing going to be? Those are just my thoughts.
And David, that for me raised another, you don't have to respond to this. I'm just my own thoughts. You know, a lot of the question about the ULURP and the zoning and the upzoning, you made that great presentation a couple of meetings ago. You know, that's all a whole nother conversation. So the density and bulk and height and all those things, whether or not it's affordable, and I think is another topic we need to tackle for another day for sure. Perry.
Yes, I agree with you, Paul. I agree with you, Jeffrey. I think the idea of saying it must be 70% is absurd without knowing the finances. And really what this will be about is how much market rate housing do we need to be able to develop the NYCHA campuses, redevelop the NYCHA campuses to the point that they need to be redeveloped, whatever that ends up being. That is really what we want, right? So I think that's what the letter should state. And the 50-50 came from, as Dave said, the original working group's recommendation for the RFP as a baseline. What we really need to know is how much market rate housing needs to be built in order to subsidize the redevelopment of the NYCHA campuses.
Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate that clarification.
7 minutes. We need
All right.
7. Yeah,
7 minutes. I'm gonna call on Mike Noble because he often asks to be called on these topics. So Mike Noble, if you have a comment on this, please turn your camera on. And keep in mind, we only have a minute or two, so give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I keep it at 50-50, just to be safe.
Thanks, Mike. All right, I would like to entertain a motion that we revise the language slightly to say at least 50-50 per the RFP from the working group. Can I hear such a motion?
I make the motion.
Vera makes the motion. And David seconds it. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Brad's hand is up. Carrie's hand is up. You guys can, Carrie and Brad, thank you. Anybody opposed to that motion? Anybody, this is not, the philosophical conversation has ended, Pam. Anybody abstaining from the motion? Any present not eligibles?
The trio.
Jeffrey, Hector, and Mike Noble. Thank you all very much. I think that was a very healthy and robust conversation. And then we need a motion to adopt the letter in its entirety based on the revisions and edits that were discussed at tonight's meeting, which the co-chairs have been taking proficient notes and will incorporate all of those changes. Can I entertain a motion to adopt the letter as revised and edited by tonight's discussion? Bert, I see yours, and Inga will second that. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you, Carrie. Marty, Betty, Viren, Brad, I don't see your hand yet. Brad's hand is up. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Any present not eligible?
The trio.
Jeffrey,
Mike,
Michael,
and Hector.
Okay, thank you all very much. This is very good. Good part of the process. Thank you.
I just want to thank you, Paul, for moderating that. Carrie, thank you for hanging in. Shanice, welcome. Glad to have you here. Everybody stay tuned for follow-ups. Full board meeting on the High Line, July 24th, Wednesday. Stay tuned for that double agenda, double whammy, June and July business on docket. And see you all then, and then in September. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, you all, and you